Hey everyone, thanks for clicking the video. I just wanted to say it's going to be a long video, but I'm really grateful for everyone who clicked, who's going to check out the whole thing, who come to my live streams, who post on my Instagram, who post on my Facebook. I'm really grateful. I read everything, I try to reply to everything, and I hope to talk to you soon. Enjoy. Hey everyone, a lot of people have been asking me, why aren't you buying as much anymore? Why isn't the museum ready? You've been living there for like 2.5 years and all that stuff. It's a bit of a complicated story, so I won't go into all the details, but I will explain some things, which is why I've been a bit down last years, and I had some other priorities. It all started a few years ago. I was about 23 or 24. I worked on a really big project for 2 years after my hours at work as an employee for an idea of a friend of me had. So he had the good hookups, he had the meetings, I had the technical skills, and we tried to sell it after it was finished to one of the biggest companies in the world. And we actually had an agreement, but when it came to signing the whole thing, they kept stalling for a few months. So we actually think they made it themselves in the end, because like let's face it, they were one of the biggest companies in the world, and they had the technical people. To this day, we never had an answer of why they called it off after 6 months of negotiating, and we flew to Austria for all the meetings and stuff. But I actually fell down for a couple of months when we lost the deal. I spent most of my time gaming and collecting. I didn't really know what to do in life actually. Do I want to keep being a developer? Do I want to make games? Do I want to do more with my collection, or etc.? After a few months, a friend of me called. He had some hookups, and he needed some help for a project. So I said, "Fuck it, let's pick up consulting again as a software engineer." For the people who don't know, I'm a software developer. I program applications for smartphones and tablets. But at the company I was going to start, I really needed a car to get there, since I didn't own one anymore. I always had lease cars from my previous jobs, but I didn't have a normal job anymore as an employee. I was a full-time business owner. So I had to buy a car. There was one for sale that kind of fit our needs in our local town where I was renting a house with my girlfriend. The garage where it was sold was a sponsor of the local fair that my family, my in-laws actually organized, and I'm just helping since they're my in-laws. It wasn't cheap, but it was a very good start. Since I just took some time off, it costed me a little bit more than that, all the money that I had left in my business. After getting it all settled, from the first week on, there were a lot of issues with the car. To make a very long story short, with all the issues, after 6 months, I went to another garage to get some more info, and they just told me, please give us the keys, don't drive this car home, it's super dangerous. So me and my girlfriend walked all the way back home, super depressed. Here in Belgium, cabs aren't that common and are pretty expensive. So I contacted the guy who sold me the car. He has an own garage where he sells cars and stuff. But he said it wasn't his fault. He sold it for someone else, which basically means there was a person he knew that wanted to sell his car, and he said, just put it on my property and I'll sell it for you. So because it didn't go through his business, the default laws didn't apply for when something is damaged when you buy it, etc. Since I bought it from another person and not from a company. Of course he knew this, but I didn't know this. So I tried to talk to my lawyers. I had an insurance for that, but they said it would probably end up costing me way more than the car and all the extra stuff did. So they said it was not really useful to do that. So again, I suddenly didn't have a car anymore. Just lost 10 grand. I rented the car from another friend from my in-laws, so I could at least keep going to my client I was currently working at, because I had a contract there. But I really need a new car. I was just losing money. But I had such a bad experience with used cars that I decided to buy a new one. Sounds logic, right? So I went to one of the biggest car festivals in the country, where they get this huge discounts and all that stuff. So I decided to buy a car there. So I had to put down a payment of about 10% of the car, which was quite a ton of money, and it was basically all I had left after the previous car fuck up. But I did it since I was losing money. We were renting cars, so I just bought it, and did all the contracts and stuff. It would take about 6 months to get it delivered, and they promised a car that I could use in the meantime, which some garages do. But that's another story that all went to shit, and I won't bore you with that. But let's say I had to rent another car for like 6 months, so even more shit, and I was really pissed off for a few months because of everything that went down in the last couple of months. So after about 3 or 4 months waiting, my accountant told me he made a little bit of an oopsie and forgot to tell me about some really heavy taxes that he forgot to mention, and that was about like $30,000, and he didn't prepare me. So I was also buying for my collection and all that stuff. I was spending money, and every 3 months you have to do a checkup, and he never said a word. So he forgot to casually mention I probably would have to pay another $30,000 or euros, whatever. So I was actually still spending quite some cash on my collection, since I thought I was doing fine. I made decent money, I had my expenses on lock. So he said, if you want to fix this, it's best that you change your company to another kind of company. So we have different kind of companies in Belgium. It all depends on which tax system you want and all that stuff. So he advised me to change it to another one. Normally you can just start a new one, but since that costs a lot of money, he said you can change your old one into the new one, and then we can fix the taxes and all that stuff. So I thought he was gonna fix it. He was gonna transfer the taxes. It would be way better, and I wouldn't have to pay the tax at once since I had good cost income ratio. Blah 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 blah. So I really rushed to get this fixed. Otherwise, I would be hella broke. It did cost me a couple of $1,000 to get it fixed, but it's better than paying 30,000, right? So that was a lot of hassle, and I was even more pissed off and sad. So much shit happening at once. It was all in the span of a few months, but I kept going strong. Me and my girlfriend adopted 2 cats by now, from the pound. But one of my biggest wishes was to have a dog someday. But we were renting a house, it wasn't allowed. It just happened so that my local, let's say, fast food restaurants had a dog in their backyard, which I didn't care for, and that broke my heart. It was from their deceased son-in-law, but they didn't have time to take care of it, so I was just living there for a few years in the backyard. So me and my girlfriend walked it about every week for a couple of days during the weekend, because that's when they were open, so we could just pick it up and then leave it there again when we were done. But since our 3-year contract of the house that we were currently renting was about to expire, and we were looking at buying for the past few years, but due to the issues I told you about before, it wasn't that possible. But we kept looking into it because it's always better to invest, right, in property. So, but my ever-growing collection, my dream of opening a kind of museum, since I started getting so much and I didn't want to keep it for myself, we were looking into buildings which provided me with such opportunities. So a house with a really big basement, or a really big attic, or a separate building, a really big garage, or like we bought now, the separate building behind it. So after a few months of searching, we found the house we currently live in, but it was very expensive. It was borderline what I was probably never gonna pay for a house, and I knew this. I knew I had to do some special accounting things to get it partially loaned on my company, partially owned private, and all that stuff. It's really boring. So we went to take a look at the house, since it was perfect, because my accountant said, yeah, you should always try to invest in property, because then you can put it in the costs and your company, etc. So we went to take a look at the house, and it was perfect. It was exactly what we were looking for. We were super excited. But the owner told us we needed to decide within 24 hours. There's some people will say, oh no, it's just him trying to convince you, but and force you. But it really wasn't like this. I still know the guy. He's a legit guy. But we needed to decide within 24 hours because they had some issues with. They were building a new house and they had some issues with payments and stuff. So it had to be done quickly. Otherwise, his neighbor was going to put down the money, but a bit less than they were asking, and then he would expand his grounds. But they tried to sell it to us, and we were like 10K above his neighbor or something. So of course they preferred us. Normally, so basically I just called the bank the next day, like, look, this is my situation. I first called my own bank and they just laughed and they said hell no. So I called the bank, which is where my family is, all their accounts are, and I explained the situation and what they thought, etc. And they said, look, normally you can't make a call that fast. It has to go through management and they have to check it and everything. So I just gave them some basic info, and he said, look, your accounts look clean. We know what you can do. You're making that much money. We will fix it. So there's no problem signing for the house. So we were super happy. We went over the next day and we signed the paperwork for the house. But there's a small clause that if we can't buy it, so there's always a fixed time of after you sign the paperwork until you have to sign the final paperwork. It's like 3 months, I think. If we didn't get it in those 3 months, the loan, then we would have to pay a fine of $60,000, and it's not, and we would also lose the house, like we wouldn't get it. So that was something super stressy, but my bank said it's no problem, so let's just leave it at that. You can sign. There's also some weird rules that he needed to be out of the house had to be sold at a certain time, or it's really complicated. So it was buy the house or pay 60K and no house. So that was kind of stressy. So after discussing with the bank for a couple of months, we made a deal. Basically, in Belgium, when you buy a house, you have to pay 10% on top of the price of the house to the government as a tax. So let's say you have a house of $500,000, you have to pay another 50,000 just to the government just as a tax, and then you have to pay another couple thousands for a notary to have everything written down officially. So we had to get like $50,000 to $60,000 just so we could get a loan and the house. So I did everything I could to get that together, since I already mentioned above, it's a lot of money. We already bought the car. I was paying off the car. We were renting a house, all that stuff. So I just stopped buying completely for my collection, which is when the first people that have been following me for a few years started wondering, like, why aren't you posting pickups anymore? But I did anything to get this sorted. My family helped out, my girlfriend's family helped out, and I'm really, really grateful for it, and they know that. But in the end, we still needed to get 100% loan, which means in Belgium, or anywhere I guess, is that we wanted to loan the entire amount of what the house costs, because we needed to pay the extra 50 or 60K on top of that. So we saved up for that. Since I already spent most of my bank before on all the issues I mentioned above, this all approximately happened in 12 months span or something. This was my fault. I know that. I started a new company. I bought a car. I bought 2 cars, and I wanted to buy a house. Since we had to get like 50, 60K together as 24-year-olds, that wasn't easy, but hey, we did it. You know what I'm saying? Now the really big but comes. After about 1 or 2 weeks before we're gonna sign the final paperwork at the bank and at the notary, I got a call at work like, look, it's been hard. We were close to not signing a deal with the bank anymore, and then I would completely blow my mind, because then I lost 60K in a house. But their main management decided that if we really wanted the loan, Then for the house separately, so not for the building I own with my company, we had to pay another 20% of the house by ourselves. So not 100%, but only 80%. And the loan for the company would be 100%. So that was like, wait, what? So suddenly I had to put down another 40, 50,000 from my own pockets, like 2 weeks, even though we had a deal, just so they would even give me a loan for the entire money. So suddenly that meant that I had to sign over like 92,000 bucks or something if we wanted the house in like 1 or 2 weeks. So that's when I really exploded and when shit hits the fan. In short, if we didn't get the other money, we wouldn't get the loan, we couldn't buy the house, and we had to pay about $60,000 in fines and didn't own a house. So that really blew my mind. So, or we needed to get the other 50K or something together, and being close to bankrupt, but at least we would have the house. So that you can imagine that was a very stressful period in my life, and I'm sorry for all the people I might have offended or called out or had fights with, whatever. It was one of the toughest years of my life, and it's mainly due to me, but it's due to the bank, it's due to the accountant who fucked me over, it's due to the garage guy who fucked me over. It was fucking insane. That being said, I did everything I could to get it together. I go overdrive in extra projects, save every buck we could. We didn't go for a holiday in years now. All the money I had aside for taxes, because that's what business owners do, I put it on my main account so I could pay it. I begged my parents for a little bit extra, which I knew they saved up for themselves. I'm still forever grateful that I could borrow it, and we're working on to get it fixed. I even asked the company where I was consulting in to get my money a month prior to what they're supposed to pay me, just so I could get it together in those 2 weeks' time. And I explained the situation, and they helped me, so I'm really thankful for that too. So let's say I didn't sleep much those 2 weeks. It was one of the worst weeks of my life. Until the very last morning of the signing, I think I was missing like 400 bucks, but I got working. I had absolutely $0 in my account, my business accounts, saving accounts, main accounts. I had absolutely nothing. So I was really happy. I even had gas to go sign the paperwork. But hey, we got a house that day. Well, kinda, not really. We were the owner of the house, but the current owners were gonna live, or the previous owners were gonna live there for another 6 months. It was part of the deal. We knew about that, but it had to be signed and crossed over. Otherwise, there were issues for them. Blah blah blah. Let's just say it was part of the deal, and we knew about that. But the following months, we were over the moon. We owned a house. We owned a new car. We had our cats. We had a dog we loved, even though he wasn't ours and didn't live with us, but still he mattered to us. We visited family with him, etc. But then even more shit hit the fan, and that's when it really fucked me over. It was very tough on me to get a grip on life again the following months. Obviously, since we had to pay rent for the house, I had to pay 2 loans for the buildings. I had my car. Things were rough, but we made it happen. I worked really hard, but then I got some other bad news from my accountant. He called again. He forgot to mention some other taxes that would come up after all, even though I transferred it, blah blah blah. So I had to end up paying another like 10 or 12,000 bucks. So I drove over there and we would talk things over, and then he casually forgot something else that I would need to pay soon, something that was from the last 3 years. They did something, it's hard to explain, but suddenly I had to pay another 14,000. But I also needed to pay the money that I set aside for buying the house for the taxes that I had to pay then, which I used in those last 2 weeks. I also had to pay, so suddenly I had to pay like 23 to 40,000 bucks, and this was insane. You can imagine my world just completely collapsed. I was scared of losing everything I owned, my collection, the new house, my car, etc. I worked my ass off to get it all fixed, but it's really hard to do when they're breathing down your neck 24/7, as you can imagine. They're all the stories I told you might be a bit shortened, but I think you can get the general concept. So when we finally moved, I had a rough time finding the right happiness in my life. I just wasn't the same person as before. But hey, we had a car, we had the house, we had the cats. We just recently found a new cat on the street while we were walking our dog that wasn't ours. And we decided to keep the cat, so we suddenly had 3 cats. Um, and when we moved, or right before we moved, actually, the owners of the dog told us, like, look, we can see you really want the dog and you love him and you can give him more attention on us. So we want you to adopt him. Otherwise, we have to take him to the pound. And we, of course, we did it. So he stayed at my father-in-law for a while until we moved, and then he came to live with us. We were just building on a future and a family like any family would do in their mid-20s, I guess, if you're in that stadium. So after about a month of living there, I went on a trip with the company I was still contracted at. Uh, and I remember that my girlfriend picked me up at the airport when I came back. It was like 2 a.m. when we nearly came home. And the second we came home, we found our oldest cat right in front of the gates. He was just hit by a car really recently because she was still warm, and it completely broke my heart. Our hearts. My girlfriend really loves her cats. It's like her little babies because it was her first cat that we adopted together, and we loved her very much. So that completely broke us. So luckily, a friend of me just contacted me the day prior that they found a cat in their yard, really young, like 5, 6 weeks old. But I didn't want to take it. But now suddenly our cat passed, and we were very frustrated. So we decided to pick it up, and then so it would ease the pain, I guess. I don't know how to explain it, but suddenly we both felt like we're gonna help that cat in honor of our just deceased cat. So we own 3 cats again, and we own the dog. Not that long after, like a month or 3, I guess, our second adopted cat, he didn't came home at the usual hours they come home to. A few hours later, he came home like at 2, 3 a.m. And it was very obvious there was something wrong. Apparently, also, he was hit by a car, but not entirely. So we rushed to the emergency vet, and they said it would be fixable. So we were over the moon. They took pictures. His hip was, I know how it's called, but it was torn apart. But they said it would be fixable. It would just take a few months. But suddenly, the vet grabbed his belly to check on him for other stuff like internal bleeding, organs or stuff, and she felt a really big lump. And that's when my heart completely got stomped on. I remember I just nearly passed out. The last few months were really hard, and that's some news I really didn't like, of course. They took some punctures and they found he had an incurable disease, and he only would have a few months to live if he were lucky. We took him home, of course. They offered that they could also put him down, but we bought medication for him so that he would not feel the pain, and we enjoyed every second with him, and he enjoyed all the attention he got. But we knew he was living on borrowed time for a few months. He did eventually pass a few months later, but it was easier to take in since we knew all along the way he was going to be put down. In those few months, we noticed that our dog was maybe a bit sad about being on his own as much, since I was working a lot. My girlfriend started working, so we decided to adopt a second second dog. Since a lot of dogs enjoy being with 2. So my girlfriend was looking online, like she usually did, at dogs that needed help, and we fell in love with the dog in Romania. We ordered her. so we had to pay for some bills, so she would get neutered and all that stuff. And then 1 month later, she would be transferred to Belgium, and we were over the moon. We always try to adopt cats or pets in general, sorry, and dogs. And it just happened that she arrived like 3 days after our cat has passed. So it was a really nice welcome to ease our minds, ease our hearts, and we decided not to adopt another cat for now because yeah, all the shit that happened in the last year. What I did forget to mention is that I met my current business partner in that year. He was a small client of me, some really small projects, but I really believed in the product that he was making, so we kept talking on how to improve. I helped him because he didn't have a really good technical background, and he was a tad older than me. But in the end, we did decided that I would take a share of his company in exchange for work. So I put my work in exchange for the shares. And now we're both shareholders of a new company that we founded on all these products, but more on that later. So I worked on this project again for like a year after hours and weekends. I invested my life into this because I believed in it that much. I really thought that was the sign I needed to get my life back together. That was gonna make a great investment from me, so I could get everything fixed. By this time, I think it's been like months or even a year. I bought any new stuff for my museum, and even if I did, it was all deals I had that I postponed that long, or some custom deals with friends that I have made over the years in collecting. So by now I have lived in the house and my museum for like over a year, and nothing was finished. All I did was invest in the cabinets that I imported from Germany really cheap, so I could display because I didn't have any money to fix or do anything else. But I was really happy with it. People kept visiting me and they said I should keep grinding it, and I loved it. I loved showing people around. But with the again back to the business partner, we had a company, and we found another company that was really interested in our product to use on a new pet project of them. So we made a deal. We were going to build something for them in real life. We were going to build something with our product integrated in it. So imagine like an iPad in something with our software on it. I gave up my full-time consulting job for this. It was a stable job for me, stable income. It wasn't the best paying, but it worked. But I gave that up and went full-time with my business partner. We made a custom integration for the client, and we agreed a contract and a price for everything. It would give us a deal that I would set me back a good amount of money each month so I could pay off my debt my accountant and the bank has caused me the previous year. So I worked really hard on it. My business partner worked really hard on it. But actually my business partner, since he knew my current situation, invested a shit ton of money starting the new company, which is like 60 or 70,000 bucks. And we invested in all the materials we needed to build the real life stuff, which was another 15,000 or something. And that was just for the teaser, so we didn't want to. We would charge the client afterwards when it's done. So we had everything built. I hooked up all the contacts. I drove all around the country to get them installed. But this was only like 1/10 or like 10% of what they requested from us. There was just a teaser. And then suddenly we got a call like, okay, we're gonna blow off the entire project. They had some management issues. They separated with the company they were doing the project together with. So they basically said, just let's call it quits. They paid us for the first couple of things that we built, but there was like zero profit for us. And we just lost another 6 months of time to get everything working and set up for them. So we ended up with nothing again. This is when I really started stressing, as you can imagine. But hey, that's just the business, I guess. That's who I am. I keep trying new things. Let's keep it at that. We're still working on this today. We have some new projects. We have a company that's interested in buying our company, our ideas, which would be really sweet. But as you can imagine, the last 2.5, 3 years has been rough on me. I do have some more good and bad news though. Last year I got sent a Facebook post by my girlfriend of a dog in the Netherlands, which is the country above us, which is like 2-3 hour drive. And the dog needed a new home due to separation of its owners. We fell in love with it, but I always wanted the third dog, even though we wanted to get a small one, because we already own 2 dogs, and one of them is pretty big. But this one was like huge, let's say like 80 plus kilos. So we thought about it for a long time, and I'm gonna explain the entire story now, so hang on. So I was on a weekend away with my friends, and I kept talking to them about it, showed them pictures, and they understood my situation. I really wanted one, but you know, with everything that's going on. But I was also talking to the new owner, the old owner, asking questions, you know, like, is he a good fit for us? But then I heard that the dog wasn't really in the Netherlands, but she lived in Hungary, which is about 1,500 kilometers from our house. So I panicked because we didn't really want to do that because that's that far. So on Sunday, the weekend was over with my friends, I drove home for 3.5 hours. And decided I really wanted to get this dog. I wanted it a lot, even though it was that far of a drive. So I came home pretty late, like 9-10 p.m. ish. I told my girlfriend I really wanted to get this dog, but we had to compromise, of course, since that's how relations work. And she saw that I really wanted, so she said, just go for it. But she couldn't join me on the ride there since she had a job interview on the Tuesday at 1 p.m. And it was Sunday night. So it was it's approximately like 14-15 hour drive. So I called up some friends, but none of them had the time or just was booked. So I decided I was just gonna go alone. I was gonna get in the car and go there. But my girlfriend said, dude, you're just gonna die. You just barely slept the entire weekend. You just drove 3.5 hours here. And I was planning on driving another 14 to 15 hours. So she said she'd join me, but only if I can promise that she would be back in time for the job interview. And this is one of those YOLO moments I had. It was 11:30 at night on a Sunday, and I just said, fuck it, let's do it. So we shoved our other 2 dogs in the car, took some basic stuff for them, and we just started driving. You can imagine the drive filled with adrenaline. I crashed hard in my due to the lack of sleep. So sometimes I took like 15-minute naps or half-hour nap when my girlfriend drove. But hey, we arrived the next day. The owner thought we were going to stay 2 or 3 days so we could meet the dog, check if we actually wanted him. Because a small note, it's one of the most dangerous and aggressive breeds in the world. They're bred to protect entire herds from wolves and bears. They're lean, mean, big machines. So when we arrived, we told her that we could only stay like 1 or 2 hours max because we had to drive home. So she was totally shocked, and yeah, that was a bit weird, I can imagine. But it was super hectic, but still a bit planned. But I don't remember much from the whole experience due to being so sleep-ridden and stuff. So let's say 1 hour later, suddenly we shove a third dog in our car. I'm lifting a 80-pound dog in my car, or sorry, kilos in my car. But we did know that we had to take him to a vet because he had a small wound in his neck. I don't know the English term. I'll get back to that. So we started driving home for another 15 hours. So yay. My girlfriend suddenly gets a huge migraine relapse. She's allergic to lactose in eggs. And something we ate in a gas station because, as you can imagine, we didn't have time for fancy dinners. She had a huge migraine from the allergic reaction. So she couldn't drive. She was just crashing hard. And due that we left so suddenly, she forgot to take her pills with her, which helped. So I'm in a car with 3 dogs, including a new one that I don't really know. It's fucking 80 kilos. I have a very sick girlfriend. Me, who barely slept in 4 days and just drove 15 hours in total last 1.5 day. Because my girlfriend was very new to driving, so she didn't drive that much in the first bit. So that went really well, as you can imagine. But what I did was sometimes took a 10-minute break on a parking lot, just on the side of the road, just put a pillow on your wheel and just sleep for for 10 minutes, put an alarm, and just keep driving again. It's one of the most dangerous things I've ever done. I will never do it again because that was insane. So then we came home after driving that long. Girlfriend took her pills and went to sleep for 2 hours because then she had to go to the job interview, which she got and still works at until today, which has been over a year. And I suddenly had 3 dogs in my living room. And again, one I didn't know much about. We did end up going to the vet next day when everything was a bit more settled with the dogs, and I actually slept a bit. When they said at the vet, like, sorry to say this, but he really needs a big operation because the wound in his neck is so severe. I still don't know the correct English terms for this, but let's say it looks like a tumor and it was bigger than my hand, but it was filled with pus. So that kind of surprised us, and we did end up with a bill of like $600-700 for the operation. But you know, we were really happy with the new dog. Every pet owner that watches this video will know what I mean. You just do everything for them. So the next few months we ended up more than we wanted at the vet. Our oldest doggo has arthritis, so he needs expensive medication. He had bladder infections. We have expensive x-ray pictures. Then the big dog started limping, so they thought he had arthritis as well. His hips are not as good, so they took more x-ray pictures, and you know how expensive they can be since narcosis is priced per kilo and he's really heavy, so just getting pictures of him is like a couple $100. But then they found out he has a torn ligament and he needs a very expensive operation. So that's where we currently are. All we do is we save up for vet bills and we live our life. We're currently saving up for the new operation. Why do I tell you all of this? Because that's how you can see that I have so much priorities in my life and I can't afford to keep buying as much as I used to for my museum. Or at least in the current state I am in my life, which is really important to me. There are a lot of fake rumors on the internet on how I made my money, how I spend it, or that I just had a big inheritance that I kept spending. But hey, everything I told you here is the real story. You can always ask me, I'm an open guy. I worked for every buck that I had. I started working when I was like just turned 18 or maybe 17. I had $50, that's where I started. I'm not gonna lie, I made a decent amount of money, which allowed me to buy as much, but I had some really big setbacks the last years that I'm trying to get through on the rough patches. I don't really know how to end all of this video, but like I said, I'm working hard on my companies and trying to get them up and running, and maybe it's looking good for now, get one of them sold so I can get back on the grind for the museum. I have a really cool project coming up after the summer. I can't say about that much, but more on that later. I will try to make more videos. I just didn't want to leave you with a sad story or anything, blah blah blah. I'm not a sobber, I'm not looking for anything. But a lot of people have asked me if they could help me. There are many ways, but I'm not gonna go into that here. This is me, this is why I'm sometimes snappy, why I'm not the happiest guy in the world. But I really love my life now. I love my pets, I love my girlfriend, I love my collection. So there will be more of me soon. But big love, jNoxx.